pretty quiet, sitting in that corner there, sometimes help with offering. But I wanted to just speak with you today a little bit about my journey and about how God weaves our stories together. So there's a little background. I grew up primarily agnostic. I had a few run-ins with God growing up, but for the most part, I didn't really hear about God or think about him much. It wasn't until April 2017 that I had an experience where God just became all too real. I was listening to these lyrics in the song, and then suddenly, just like that, I was like, whoa, like, God is real, this is incredible, and it just blew my mind. And it sent me kind of on a crazy journey, one that involved psychosis, a hospital stay. I ended up in the hospital, and I spent about a year and a half experiencing delusions and really struggling with reality. So it was a rocky journey, but as hard as it was to get through, I'm finally starting to see the puzzle pieces coming together and see how God is using that experience to kind of form who I am today. And it's led also to my life's work that I'm very passionate about. So I just wanted to kind of talk to you about that today. And because one of the things I love, even before, because I didn't start believing until 2017, but even before then, God was still working behind the scenes, and I love that. I love that you don't have to believe in God for him to work in you and work through you. So I want to take you back to about spring 2015, because when I look back, that's when I kind of start to see God planting the seeds. And back then I was really depressed. I was an alcoholic. I didn't know it at the time, but I was drinking too much. I was probably smoking too much. I was in a dead-end relationship, and then I lost my job. And when I lost my job, that sent me over the edge. I just really snapped, and overnight everything had kind of changed. My depression deepened. I really started struggling just communicating with words. There'd be times where I'd try to speak and just nothing would come out. I would rarely leave the house. My social anxiety deepened, and when I did leave the house, I was just very tense and on edge and could rarely look people in the eye. But yeah, one of the biggest things I think that I struggled with was words and communicating and speaking. And especially if I was overwhelmed or too emotional or anything, I would just kind of lock up and feel trapped inside my body, and I wouldn't be able to communicate. It's just words would disappear from my mind. And one of the reasons this was really hard for me was because up to this point I was an aspiring picture book writer. And now I found myself in a position where I'd take a pen to paper and just nothing would come out. But little did I know that this would actually end up being one of the biggest blessings that God could have given me. Because I get excited about this. Come October 2015, I came across a Facebook post of this little boy named Nathaniel who had a traumatic brain injury and Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And Lennox-Gastaut syndrome is a severe form of epilepsy. And I came across this post. I was just really inspired by it. Here's this mom, a single mom, and her son. And I just learned a little bit about their journey and the hardships that they face. And I was just inspired. Here's this family. I was just thinking, here I am just struggling to get through the week, let alone the day. And then here you have this family who's still able to find joy through the moments despite the illness trying to hold them back. I'm just looking at this picture, this little boy smiling from ear to ear, and it was incredible to me. It was inspiring. It inspired me to keep fighting. It inspired a lot of hope in me. And so I decided I kind of wanted to create something for him. I got the idea that, I wanted to create something that highlighted him for the rock star that he was and showed him what it was that I, and I'm sure others, thought of him when they saw him and heard his story. So I got the idea to create a music video. And so I approached his mom and said, how do you feel about me using photos and videos from your page to create something? And she gave me permission. She said, yeah, sure, go for it. So I created this music video, and it felt amazing. I felt such a release, and I felt completely full. And I felt like I finally found my voice again, and that was the biggest thing. And I never needed words to begin with. In fact, I thought, and I still think to this day, that I can say more in a music video than I can say with words alone. And so it was just an incredible blessing. And so I kept making videos, probably 3 or 4, and until the following year I thought, maybe there's more I can do for these families. they're out here trying to spread awareness and share their stories, and we know that they have incredibly powerful stories to share, right? I mean, they not only do they teach us about love and gratitude and the importance and the joy that you can find in the moment, but they have incredible testimonies of their faith. And they're out here being vulnerable. And I don't think we place enough importance on how important it is to actually be vulnerable when we're telling our stories. I think sometimes we can be blinded by the fact that, there's others out there who do in fact know what we're going through, who also may feel misunderstood or unseen or, just alone. And I think, I think God works through our stories, and I think the more vulnerable we are with each other, the deeper connections we can form with each other, and the more that God can work through us and shine His light through us. So that's when my kind of life's work began. I founded the Here's Hope Project, and I went on this mission to sort of amplify the voices of these families who have children that battle chronic illness. And so I share their stories, and I still make videos to honor their journeys. And I just became really passionate. I've always been really passionate about stories, but even more so now, just because of the influence that it's had on my life and on my journey. And just stories are, incredibly, they're healing. They inspire hope and connection, and they provide us with, a sense of direction, and they can provide just guidance and wisdom along our journey, just as we're all trying to just navigate life, right? And God uses these stories to sort of weave us together. And I believe that God used the stories of these families to lead me to Him. And I wouldn't say it at the time because I didn't believe, but I would later be able to look back and say, God knew what He was doing when He led me to them. He knew that they would inspire me to keep fighting, and He knew that they would provide a lot of direction and purpose in my life. Oh, okay, so one of the coolest things about these families, one of the most inspiring things is their faith. If you remember in the beginning I was saying, I didn't really grow up hearing much about God or thinking much about Him, but now I found myself surrounded by people of faith. Yeah. And it surprised me. It surprised me that people who can undergo such trauma and pain can still believe in a God that would allow such things to happen. I mean, they could have a child that just had an open heart surgery, or maybe they're in ECMO fighting for their life, or maybe they had a bone marrow transplant because of their compromised immune system. They're not able to leave the hospital, leave their room for sometimes weeks at a time. They're having to isolate, and they can't have any visitors. And yet still, despite whatever storm they were in, they would still talk about in their posts how much faith they had and how much they believed that God was right beside them on their journey, and how He believed that they would supply them with their every need and would help them get through it. He would carry them through it. And that's incredible. That's incredible, right? I mean, it's incredible because I didn't have that when I first started to believe. When I first started to believe, there were so many times I was so transfixed on my own pain that I didn't know how to let God in, let anyone in for that matter. And I didn't always believe that things would work out all right for me. And then here you have these families who undergo probably so much more trauma and pain, and they still believe that God is right next to them. How do they do that? Any idea? Because I didn't know. I had no idea how they did this. But God knew I was struggling with this, and He had a plan. And His plan came to fruition sometime in 2018. And 2018 was the hardest year of my life. I was still experiencing a lot of delusions. I was struggling with reality. I have bipolar disorder. So I had a lot of highs where I kind of felt on top of the world, and then I had a lot of lows where I was really depressed and I would contemplate suicide. And I must have said 100 times, I surrender, please take the wheel. I must have said that 100 times, but they were just words, just empty words. Until one Sunday, I was scheduled to go to church and to lunch with a friend. The church was out in Overlake, it was about an hour away. And I woke up that morning, and I felt so heavy. I was so depressed, and I could barely get out of bed. And I'm thinking, I should just cancel. I can't do this. I'm exhausted. I mean, that's what happens when you're really depressed. You get really fatigued, and it's hard to move sometimes. And then I thought, given the way I feel, maybe church is the best place that I could be. Maybe I'll hear some message or hear something that will lift me out of this. So somehow, I mustered up the strength. I got up, I got out of bed, I got in the car, drove to church, met with my friend, got into service started, and I just wasn't there. I wasn't present. Because now I was thinking, like, oh, well, after this, I told my friend that I have lunch with her. How am I going to do that? I mean, I can barely stand up straight right now. I'm so heavy, I'm exhausted. I must have just been talking to myself like this, and after about 10 to 15 minutes, I heard myself speak, and I realized I'm not headed anywhere but down. I'm only feeding the depression. And so I had that moment again, and I said, you know what, God, I know I say this 100 times, but I feel like a skeleton trying to climb a mountain right now. Like, I'm exhausted. I can't do this. Just please, I know I've said this 100 times, but if you're there, if you're real, if you exist, just please help me, because I've got nothing left. And then a moment later, I heard myself say, okay, breathe. All you have to do right now is be here. Just be in this moment and take the next best step. And then trust that God will carry you through it and he will have the rest. So I did that. I said, okay, breathe. I'm here. All I have to do. I don't have to worry about lunch with my friend. I don't have to worry about 5 minutes from now. All my job right now is just to be here. And just take in my surroundings and just listen to service. And so I ended up enjoying service. I felt this weight lift off of me, and I ended up enjoying service. I went to lunch with my friend, no problem. And then I'm driving home, and I'll always remember this because of this experience just imprinted in me. I wasn't even on the highway yet. I'm driving, I'm at this light about to turn, and I just went, whoa, what just happened? I feel physically lighter.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna be okay. I think I'm gonna be okay. I mean, all I have to do right now is drive home. I have no idea what's gonna happen when I get home. It doesn't matter. All that matters right now is I'm here. I just have to drive home. And it felt incredible. I don't know. And it reminds me of my favorite verse, 2 Corinthians 12:9, which Dan had said earlier, only when we're weak can everything be done completely by my power. I mean, that's so true, right? I mean, I think this is the time when this happened. I think it really started, well, first I should point out that it's not like I just had this experience and suddenly have it all together. I mean, I still struggle with depression and anxiety, and I have to remind myself that all the time, sometimes daily. In fact, I had to remind myself that yesterday and today. I was super, super nervous about this speech. I mean, I wrote 3 pages, it's all here, rehearsing it. And I'm terrified. I feel like I'm gonna go up here and everyone's staring at me like they're all staring at me right now. I'm gonna lose all of my words, and it's gonna be terrifying. So I'm still holding on to this. Like, if I lose my words, I got this here. I got it, just in case. I don't want to jinx it. Yeah, it is. So I still have to remind myself of this all the time. But it is when it really started to register with me, the peace that you can find when you really live in the moment, and the strength that you can gain when you truly trust that God has the rest and will carry you through it. So now I think I finally get it. I think maybe this is what the parents go through with their children. Maybe they reach a point where they've just given it their all with all of their own strength until they reach a point where they realize, I can't do this alone. Like, I need God. And what comes out of that when you finally let go, it's a beautiful thing. It's really, really cool. It's like what I was saying before about what these families teach us. They teach us about love and gratitude and the joy that you can find in the moment. And when you let go like that, when you really trust that God has your back and the universe has your back and that you're going to be okay, that's what kind of comes out of it. And one of the things that I love the most is that, it allows you to love harder because you're not held captive by all these thoughts in your head. You're able to give more of yourself. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And so much of who I am today has to do with what God shows me through these stories and families, the stories that I hear from families every day. And so as time went on, I started to feel more connected to the people and the stories around me. He works through our stories to reach other people and connect us on a deeper level. So I wanted to speak here today and just kind of encourage all of you to, just be open and vulnerable in sharing your stories. And just don't be afraid, because you never know who your stories might reach and who they might touch. Because just as God is working in your life, that story of how he works will end up working through you to reach and help other people. So thank you.
Woohoo! Amen.